Hello, you're watching Inside the Americas with me, Laura Sellier, coming up in the programme. 1 year on, Colorado weighs up the pros and cons of legalising cannabis. Plus, demanding the truth in Argentina, thousands march on behalf of Alberto Nisman, the prosecutor who was found dead just a day before he was due to testify about a government cover-up. And Cuba's art boom, Havana's rapprochement with the United States, is fueling demand for pieces of this island's cultural heritage. We begin, though, in the United States, where President Barack Obama has promised to make America a fairer place during his last 2 years in office. Meanwhile, a man accused of opening fire in a packed cinema in Aurora has gone on trial, and a star-studded crowd has been marching to honour civil rights hero Martin Luther King. Julia Seeger has this wrap on the top story stateside.
President of the United States.
It was his sixth State of the Union address, and for the first time his speech did not mention an economic crisis. According to Obama, the U.S. has turned that page.
After a breakthrough year for America, our economy is growing and creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999.
On the foreign policy front, the president demanded greater military power to fight the Islamic State organization.
We stand united with people around the world who've been targeted by terrorists, from a school in Pakistan to the streets of Paris. We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks, and we reserve the right to act unilaterally.
Among the crowd was Alan Gross, who spent 5 years in a Cuban prison and was released as part of the deal to end the freeze between Washington and Havana. Fellow actors from the movie Selma and hundreds of others poured onto the streets of the small Alabama town on Sunday to recall one of the bloodiest chapters of the civil rights movement. The original march from Selma to Montgomery, dubbed Bloody Sunday, was followed days later by another march led this time by Martin Luther King Jr. Riots that resulted in the subsequent passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Everybody who crossed that bridge on Bloody Sunday and then had the courage to get up and go again on Tuesday and then do the final march, every single person who was on that bridge is a hero.
The remembrance came on the eve of the National Day honoring Martin Luther King Jr. James Holmes' long-awaited trial finally began on Tuesday with jury selection. The troubled gunman accused of killing 12 cinema-goers at a 2012 premiere of a Batman movie in Aurora appeared in court on Tuesday. The 27-year-old has pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, but could face the death penalty if convicted.
Well, staying with the US, and it's been a year now since the state of Colorado legalised the use of cannabis. Since then, the number of local people smoking pot has remained stable at around 10%. The new laws, though, are attracting a huge number of visitors, and they're coming to Colorado simply to light up stress-free. But as Luke Schrager reports, not everyone's happy about this new boom in cannabis tourism.
It's all aboard the tour bus in Colorado. But this is a trip in more ways than one, with tourists paying €150 a head to check out a local specialty. And why ride when you can float?
Been waiting a long time for this.
Cannabis has been legal in the US state since January last year, as long as it's not smoked in public. That's drawn people from as far away as Texas and the East Coast.
Well, basically, I came just for the day today to do this crazy excursion. It's unbelievable to me that this has come to pass.
No tour would be complete without a visit to the grow houses. Colorado's gone far beyond legalizing cannabis. In fact, the state's seen around 200 businesses spring up to produce the product. They're catering to a huge potential market. Up to 10% of US citizens are thought to use it.
Really used to hiding and still want to get in the car and hide.
Pete's canna business is in full bloom. For him, marijuana has its medical advantages, though recreational use is what nets him 80% of his turnover. With the market worth up to €12 million a year, growing's moved out of the basement and has become an industrial operation. This 3,500 square meter indoor jungle can produce up to 60 kilos a week.
The big buds make us more money. It is very much like growing gold. If I was to extract just the THC, it's worth more than gold.
Things are going so well, Pete's already opened a new warehouse, as well as a boutique where he sells cannabis products in edible form.
Chocolate, banana, coconut chocolate, just all different flavors. We have drinks.
However, that's too much for certain worried mothers in Colorado. They've begun a campaign aimed at highlighting the dangers to increasing numbers of children who are ending up in hospital.
Those are wrappers of real candy. That's marijuana candy right there. Peach, banana rings. Cannabis, that's without cannabis. We'd like to see maybe one color that is sprayed on all candies. Other suggestions were that every product would have to have a stamp on it. That wouldn't work on something like this, right? So the only thing that would work is color.
Rachel hopes her group will be able to pressure authorities into imposing strict guidelines on identifying the products in question. For now, though, producers are digging in their heels. Colorado will finally decide on what to do at the beginning of 2016. That gives the state another year to collect on the 30% taxes applied to cannabis sales. They're worth 50 million euros a year.
To an extraordinary case in Argentina now. Alberto Nisman accused President Cristina de Kirchner and her government of covering up Iran's role in a terrorist attack almost 20 years ago. Well, he had been just about to make his case to lawmakers, but 24 hours before he was due to appear, he was found dead in his apartment. Officials are calling it suicide, but his supporters suspect something far more sinister. Thousands of them have been marching in cities across Argentina, with some 2,000 taking their protest directly to the presidential palace in Buenos Aires. There they chanted, "Murderer."
Alberto Nisman was found in his bathroom with a bullet wound on the right side of his head and a handgun and casing next to him. His apartment was locked from the inside. That's according to the authorities' initial investigations, which they said pointed to suicide. But 2 days after his death, the prosecutor in charge of the inquiry announced tests showed no traces of gunpowder on the 51-year-old's hands, but that doesn't rule out suicide. His passing has peculiar timing. Nisman was a prosecutor, and his death came the day before he was to testify before Parliament. His investigations had led him to believe President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner and other top officials protected Iranian suspects in the 1994 bombing of a Jewish center in a bid to gain favor with Iran and access to its oil. 85 people were killed in the attack in Buenos Aires. The government has strongly denied Nisman's claims.
What we are clear about is that the testimony and alleged evidence that were going to be presented were completely inconsistent. Our objective has always been to bring to light the facts surrounding the attack.
The president has said she fully backs an inquiry into his death, meanwhile posting on Facebook a statement asking what would cause someone to take their own life. Demonstrators across the country have demanded an end to what they call Impunity K, a reference to President Fernández de Kirchner.
And finally, the diplomatic wheels are in motion as Cuba and the United States begin the process of normalising ties after decades of hostility. A high-ranking US delegation is in Havana this week. They'll be discussing plans to open embassies, new rules for immigration, and Cuba's demand that the US removes it from a list of states that fund terrorism. Well, it's not just the politicians who are in town. The opening up of Cuba is attracting international investors who want to get their hands on a piece of the island's unique cultural history.
It's the second time in 2 months that this group of Americans are visiting Cuba. They're here on an art license with a New York-based gallery to see and purchase Cuban art. They believe this market is about to boom following the announcement that Cuba and the U.S. are to restore diplomatic ties.
What fraction of a % of America has seen Cuba in the last 60 years? So I think Cuban art is about to explode. I mean, it's going up fast, faster than everyone anticipated.
Since 1962, an embargo has prevented the importation to the U.S. of most Cuban products. But there are no limits on informational items like books, films, music, and artwork. This exemption partly explains Cuba's large number of artists and the international fame some of them enjoy. Kadir Lopez is one of them. He sold his first piece for $300 20 years ago. Today, he says the same piece is worth at least $25,000.
It was an exception of the embargo. Why? It was lucky for us. It's because art carries information. It's a flux of information, and that has to do with freedom of expression.
But restrictions on payment with U.S. credit cards or direct shipping still apply, making the process complicated and expensive for American buyers. For Luis Miret, director of Cuba's oldest art gallery, the resumption of ties will indeed simplify everything.
New factors are going to come in. New entities, galleries, art centers, foundations, museums. If things get simpler, they will all come with a lot more interest in selecting Cuban artists, and we will share the international promotion cost.
The Cuban Ministry of Tourism estimates that ending the embargo could bring 1 million more tourists to the island every year. Some artists, however, see this as a double-edged sword.
I think this boom can be good and dangerous. It all depends on whether we will be able to handle this avalanche of demand, of people who want to discover, see and learn, and others who will want to speculate. We have to be careful.
For big changes to take place, the embargo would have to be lifted, an unlikely event in the short term, with the U.S. Republican-led House strongly opposing the move. But the value of Cuban art is still increasing on the speculation that Cuba will indeed one day change.
Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.